What's up, Rocket Nation? Welcome to the Wick Boyz Toledo Rockets podcast. I am your host, Brian Nowicki. I am the former managing editor of Rocket Digest on the old Scout.com network and the former owner and managing editor of the Rocket Nation on the Rivals.com network. Today is the first official episode of the show. We'll be breaking it down into two segments today. The first segment will be on the football transfer portal, which just opened up yesterday, December 5th. And then the second segment, we'll be talking about what I feel is the biggest area of concern for the football team at this time, and that's the offensive line and what Coach Candle can do to fix the issues on the line. So, a lot to talk about today. We'll get right into segment one. And the transfer portal, like I said, officially opened yesterday, December 5th. And one player from the Toledo football team did enter the portal right away. That's junior offensive lineman Lavelle Demont, 6'4", 295 pounds from Tampa, Florida. He's actually entering as a graduate transfer with 1 year of eligibility remaining. Of course, immediate eligibility. This year he played in 5 games, starting 2 of them against Ohio State and San Diego State. So not necessarily a big loss there for Toledo. When you do enter the transfer portal, you can always come back to the school that you're at, but I really do not expect that to happen in this case. He seems pretty destined to be going elsewhere, and he has been removed from the roster on the website already as well. So, okay, transfer portal. It's become the big thing in college football lately, right? The last couple of years have just been insane, and Monday was outrageous. There was somewhere around 500 FCS and FBS college football players that entered the portal on Monday alone. Around 400 of those were FBS players. Just insane amount of players transferring these days. It's really like NFL free agency at the college level right now, right? If you don't like the way things are going in the situation you're in, just transfer. You most likely are getting immediate eligibility, and you get to play somewhere else the following year. So, Toledo right now, we've got one player that entered the portal on Monday. Not too bad. Some of these schools have more than 10, dozens. Shouldn't say dozens, but a dozen or more. Alabama, a big one. Texas A&M, a few others I think that are over 10. Kent State out of the MAC, the last I saw, had 10 players. Several players from Central Michigan, so forth. So it's becoming the way of college football. Really, it really is. The transfer portal is where you can go to get a fresh start as a player, and as a coaching staff, you get the ability to address needs, almost like when you bring in JUCO players, junior college transfers. But in this case, they've actually got, in most cases, Division I experience, whether it's FCS, FBS, and sometimes they only have a year left, sometimes a couple years, 2-3 years, whatever. And it's a way to bring somebody in that's going to be able to play right away. So anytime that you can bring in a solid player that's going to be able to contribute right away, it makes sense to look at that player, right? I have no idea at this point what Toledo's going to be targeting from the transfer portal. They do seem to target it at least to a certain extent every year. And we'll have to see what they do. But in my opinion, the number one priority has to be the offensive line. It just has to be. And that's going to go into segment 2 a little bit, talking about the offensive line. But I would personally like to see at least 2 offensive linemen come in as transfers that have Division I experience and can start right away next fall. And again, I'll get into that more with segment 2, but I think that's the priority right now. You got to get players in here that can upgrade our offensive line, help our running backs and not get hit in the backfield, help the quarterback so he doesn't have to scramble. I mean, geez, Finn and Gleason were just running for their lives at times this year, and we need help on the offensive line. So that's the number one target area that I would look at. I also think that there's opportunities at skilled positions, wide receiver, running back for sure. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball, and it makes sense any place that you have key players leaving that you might want to bring somebody in that has experience elsewhere that can contribute right away. You look at linebacker Gant came in from Ohio State this year to Toledo, and he's been great. So a situation like that is a good pickup. Definitely help at linebacker would be big. Defensive line would be big as well. Again, not as big a priorities as the offensive line. The offensive line is still that number one priority. But we have some good players at the defensive line that we're going to be missing, and linebacker and so forth. So even in the secondary, anybody you can bring in that has that good quality experience that can make an impact right away next fall, you want to make sure that you look at those players. So that's really where I'm at. We need to bring in two really good offensive linemen, I think, to help out that can play right away, that have the experience. So I'm not just talking about bringing somebody in that's a true freshman and they have some experience and so forth. Not some experience, I'm sorry, but some good talent, and you feel like they could play right away. I want somebody with experience at the college level as well. So that's why I think the transfer portal is a good place to bring in a couple of good offensive linemen. So that's where I'm at with the transfer portal. As we get more details on transfer portal in upcoming episodes, we'll talk more about it. And right now I'm going to switch over to segment 2. But before I do that, if you have any comments about the transfer portal, what you're thinking, who Toledo should bring in, go ahead and put those comments in below, and maybe I can talk about it then at the next episode, or in an upcoming episode at least. All right, so that takes us to a very interesting topic here that I think a lot of Rocket fans definitely will have an interest in, and that's how can Coach Candle fix the offensive line? So there's really there's just no other way to put it than that the offensive line has not been as good the last few years. And I'm going to go through a few things here, some statistics and some other things as to why I say that it needs fixing. And so first of all, this is not anything against Mike Hallett. He's a co-offense coordinator. He's the offensive line coach. He's been here. This is his 7th season now. He's a great guy. He really is. But we've had problems with the offensive line, and I'm just going to go out there with what we have seen. And I'm going to start it out with the previous offensive line coach, who was Tom Manning. And he was a very good offensive line coach for Toledo. In fact, in his last year at Toledo, back in 2015, footballscoop.com had him listed as the offensive line coach of the year in college football. That's how good he was. So, I may be a little biased that I want everybody to be as good of an offensive line coach as Tom Manning, but still think you'll see here when I talk through some of these stats just what the difference has been. It's been pretty incredible. So first of all, let's look at the last 3 years Tom Manning was here. In 2013, the offensive line only gave up 6 quarterback sacks in 12 games played. And that was even playing at Florida and at Missouri. Then in 2014, it did increase some. It went to 17 sacks in 13 games. Still not an overall bad number. 2015, the year that he was the footballscoop.com offensive line coach of the year in college football, just 5 sacks in 12 games. 5 sacks in 12 games. An incredible job at the offensive line. 2016, Tom Manning now has moved on. And in 2016, Mike Hallett is now the offensive line coach. And still wasn't bad. 14 sacks, 13 games. A little bit higher than the 5, of course, from the year before, but still not that bad. But here's where you're going to see the trend. In his second year, 2017, 22 sacks in 14 games. And this was the MAC championship year with Logan Woodside. The team went 11-3, but sacks did increase to 22. The next year, 2018, 29 sacks. That's in 13 games. In 2019, 29 sacks again, this time in just 12 games. 2020 did get a little better, but it's only because the number of games played. 15 sacks, but only in 6 games. If you double that to 12 games, you're talking 30 sacks. So again, not very good. 2021 last year, 36 sacks in 13 games. We gave up 36 sacks in 13 games. I mean, that's nearly 3 sacks a game. Not good at all. And then this year, it actually improved some. 24 sacks in 13 games, but still, we're talking 24 sacks. I mean, when we were talking about Tom Manning, we were saying 6 sacks, giving up 17, 5. And it's progressively gotten worse, except for this year wasn't quite as bad in the last 6, 7 years. Now, the other number that we're going to look at is rush yards per game. And this also is indicative of how well the offensive line is opening the holes for the running backs. We're going to go back to 2013, and this was Kareem Hunt's first year at Toledo. He's a freshman, 240.6 yards per game rushing. 2014, 256.4. 2015, 207.9. Those are the last 3 years with Tom Manning as the offensive line coach. Great numbers. In all of Tom Manning's time as the offensive line coach, he only had one season that we didn't have over 200 yards rushing per game, and that was his very first season. So you can see he did a great job. 2016 was Kareem Hunt's final year at Toledo, and it was Mike Hellett's first year on the offensive line as the offensive line coach. And we dipped down to 195 yards per game. Kareem Hunt still did a great job, over 5 yards per carry, but we dipped under 200 for the first time in years. 2017 went up just a little bit, 204 yards per game. 2018, 215.9 yards per game. 2019 was even 224.5 yards per game. So even though we had a lot of sacks, 2018, 2019, we're talking 29 sacks each year. The rushing yards per game weren't too bad. So, it's hard to say there. Were those QB scrambles? Maybe I didn't really dig in that deep, but it wasn't too bad at that point. Then 2020 is when it all kind of fell apart. And this wasn't a great year for Toledo. We know that. It's only a 6-game schedule, but, it was the whole COVID year. But 168.2 rush yards per game, and there were 15 sacks in 6 games. Just not a great overall year offensively. 2021, number went back up a bit, 196.5 rush yards per game, but still under 200. And that was in Brian Kobach's last season here at Toledo. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. And still, we were under 200 yards per game rushing. And then this year, 2022, down again, 178 yards per carry, or yards per game rushing. So 4 of Hellett's 7 seasons as the offensive line coach for the Rockets, we've rushed for less than 200 yards per game. 4 of the 7 seasons, including the last 3 seasons. Now, going back, I had said that Tom Manning only had his very first season that we rushed for less than 200 yards per game. Big difference there. So I brought up the stats, the sacks given up, the rushing yards per game. But that's not the worst part of the offensive line's woes. Penalties. So many false starts. So many false starts and holding calls against the offensive line in the last 2 years at least. Probably 3 years, I should say. It's just you know, like I said before, Finn and Gleason were running for their life quite often when they dropped back for pass. Uh, the footwork really, if you watch the video, the footwork from the offensive line is lacking. It's just not as good as it should be. And it's causing missed blocking assignments. And then it's causing holding penalties because they're reaching to grab the guy so he doesn't sack the quarterback. It's just not a good situation. The team needs an upgrade in recruiting on the offensive line. That's where the transfer portal could come in, but just bringing in players from high school too. We need an upgrade on the athletes that are coming in. And yes, they are athletes on the offensive line. And the other thing, like I said, the footwork isn't where it needs to be. We need to get back to basics, a back to basics approach on footwork drills and just get the footwork down better. Um, Often I'm not seeing quick enough feet, or I'm seeing just too much indecisiveness, right? And and the other thing that happens, like I mentioned in the pass rush, they're not picking up the blitz as well as they should. And again, that's footwork. You got to be able to move quick. You're a big guy. You're not expected to run really fast, but you have good, quick footwork. And that's what Toledo needs. So it's an upgrade in recruiting, upgraded talent players, and really going back to basics on the footwork and, you know, doing some of the basics just in practices every day and so forth. So, it's been trouble. There's no doubt about it. That's the biggest problem right now with the team. You look at the MAC championship win, it was 17-7. 17 points, not what we're accustomed to seeing from the offense. The defense played great, only gave up 7 points. And I know it was Ohio's backup quarterback, but look, he played against Bowling Green before that, and they scored a lot of points against Bowling Green. So our defense played great in this game. Offense, did okay, nothing even good. I can't even say it was good. We just stumbled a lot, and a lot of it had to go with the offensive line. There were so many false starts or holding penalties that just killed drives. You know, whether it's Finn or Gleason, it's not a good situation when you're starting out first and 15, first and 20, second and 20, or second and 15 inside your own 20-yard line to start a drive because you've gotten called for one or two penalties already to start the drive. It's hard, you know. You you end up probably going 3 and out, and you punt it to the other team. They have good field position, and you just went 3 and out. So your defense may not be as well rested as they should be. They could be pretty tired because they were just out on the field. And you fix the offensive line, you're going to be able to get more first downs. You're going to do better on offense, and it's going to help the defense even more because they're not going to be as tired going out there all the time. There've just been too many 3 and outs, too many penalties, and we just got to improve the offensive line. And we got a game coming up here, December 20th, the Boca Raton Bowl against Liberty. And if we want to win that game, we are going to have to do better on the offensive line. There's no question about it. That will definitely be a different episode to talk about the Boca Raton Bowl. We will be talking about that coming up in a future episode. But, this one really, the key focus today was offensive line. And let me know what you all think. I mean, first of all, I'm going to say it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said, if you fix the offensive line, it's going to make the whole team better. It's going to make the offense better. It's going to make the defense even better. And the less they have to be going back on the field so often, if they can get a little bit of a rest and so forth, the better the defense is going to be. And that's key. You got to get some first downs. You can't have the 3 and outs. You can't have the penalties. So that's where I'm at with the offensive line. And let me know in the comments below what you think. And if you've got suggestions other than what I mentioned for the offensive line or what we can do to fix the issues, definitely let me know, and we can talk about it in a future episode as well. All right. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Wick Boyz Toledo Rockets podcast.